So you're planning to take pictures on a once-in-a-lifetime trip. How do you make sure all those images are protected when you're on the road? I'll tell you on today's episode of
Ask David Bergman.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back. Here I am, as always, answering your photography questions right here on Adorama TV. If you've got a photo question, you know what to do. You just go to askdavidbergman.com and submit that form on the site. I just might pick your question and answer right here on a future show. Today's question was sent in by David S., and he wants to know, I will be traveling for a once-in-a-lifetime trip later this year. I want to back up my images while away from my home computer. What type of external hard drives and ingesting methods for memory cards do you recommend to make sure all the images end up working when I get home? Thanks, David. That's a great question, especially for me. As Luke Combs' tour photographer, we just started up this year's tour, and I'm on the road almost every weekend for the next few months. Sidebar, if you're not already following me on Instagram, I'm at David Bergman. I haven't been posting much lately, but I'm hoping to get back into it now that I'm out once again documenting Luke's stadium concerts. So check that out. Anyway, I've always traveled a lot throughout my photography career, so I've developed some systems to manage all those images when I'm out of town. And I'm going to tell you what I do, but you might make some adjustments based on your particular situation. The key is to be consistent so that you don't lose anything as you move from place to place. Now, David said he's going to be away from his home computer. So to me, that means he's using different machines on the road and at home. I actually don't do that. Since I travel so much, I use an Apple MacBook Pro laptop on the road, and then when I get back home, I simply hook it up to a big external monitor. For years, I had the BenQ SW320, which is a 32-inch high-quality monitor that's great for photography. That's now been replaced by the newer SW321C, and I'll put a link to that and all the other stuff I'm going to mention in the description down below, as always. But whatever you use, it's been proven over and over again that working on a large display or two increases productivity. I have my email open on the laptop screen off to the side when I'm working, and I can have multiple windows open on the main screen. Or I can just work on photos nice and big, which allows me to see all the detail I need when I'm at 100% resolution. And it's great to have all that space for video editing these Ask David Bergman videos. But the point is that I don't have to switch computers when I get back to New York City. So anything I do on my computer on the road is already on my home computer since it's the same machine. It used to be that laptops didn't have nearly the same amount of power as a desktop machine. But today, the high-end laptops will rival most desktop computers. I love having only one machine because I can access my photo libraries even if I'm offline or on an airplane or out of the country, wherever. If you prefer to use a lightweight, less expensive laptop on the road and then have a separate, more powerful machine at home, then you just have to be more careful to make sure you sync everything up when you get back. I'll talk more about that in a bit. But in the meantime, let's go over a few of the things I do before leaving town. The first thing I do before a big shoot is to clean out my photo cards. I highly recommend investing in good digital cards for your cameras. We spend all this money on camera bodies and lenses, but don't scrimp on the cards. That's where your images are first stored, and if they go bad, then you might have nothing at all. Now, I only use pro-grade digital cards and readers. That company caters to the pro market, and I found their quality control is very good. If you're using one of their cards made in the last few years, it probably has a little R on the outside. That means if you're also using one of their external readers, it'll be compatible with their Refresh Pro software. Now that program wipes the card completely clean and brings it back to the state it was in right from the factory. It can also do a health check to let you know your cards are in good shape, and you can even update the firmware if needed. It's kind of crazy that these digital cards have firmware on them, but yes, they do, and they can be updated by you using that software. Now, this whole process only takes a minute or two, and I do it about once a year. I actually just used Refresh Pro on all of my pro-grade digital cards just a few weeks ago before this year's tour started, and it just gives me some peace of mind knowing my cards are all clean and healthy. Now, as far as how much storage you should have available on those cards when you travel, I would say to bring at least 4 or 5 times as much space as you think you'll ever need. The idea is that you don't want to have to format and reuse cards while on the road. You're going to be copying the photos to your computer, but leaving images on those cards is one form of backup. Now, I like to use cards with lots of storage on them. I currently have a bunch of 1 terabyte CF Express cards and even a couple of 2 terabyte ones. That's insane. But it's crazy that we have that much space now available on these tiny little cards. Now, I do know that some people say it's better to use more smaller cards in case one of them fails. You don't have all of your images on one card, but knock on wood, I've had very few issues with cards in the last decade or so. Like I said, if you're buying quality cards and are taking care of them by doing things like refreshing or deep formatting once in a while, then you're less likely to have errors. Of course, no technology is perfect, and if you're comfortable with more smaller cards instead of fewer bigger ones, then that's fine, you do you. But if your camera has 2 card slots, you can also have it automatically shoot to both, so you also have an immediate backup. Oh, and something I forgot to mention before is to always bring a second card reader with you as well. If you shoot to SD cards, some computers have an SD reader built right into the side. So that plus an external reader will virtually guarantee you'll be able to copy your images to the computer, even if something goes wrong. Now, the other thing I do before a big shoot is I check all of my camera settings, starting with the date and time. If you're going to be in another time zone, it's a good chance to set all your cameras so your images will be tagged with the proper time at your location. Honestly, I don't change mine when I'm just traveling in the US because I do that every week and it would just be crazy. But if I'm going overseas and it's going to be more than a few hours difference, I'm going to update the time accordingly. Now, on Canon cameras, the easiest way to do this is to connect the body up to the computer using a USB cable and then launch the EOS Utility app. That allows you to sync the camera time to the time on the computer. And since I have multiple cameras, I'll do that with each of them, and I know they'll all be on the correct time. If your camera brand doesn't have a program like that, you can manually set the date and time in the menus. Now, I'm also going to take this opportunity to check all of the settings in my cameras. Sometimes I make little changes for specific shoots. If I was using one camera as a remote, for example, it'll be set up differently than if I'm hand holding it. So I need to double check all of that. I'm also going to fully charge all of the batteries for my cameras and flashes and whatever I'm bringing with me. That way, as soon as I pull my camera out of my bag to shoot, I'm ready to go. And don't forget to pack all those chargers and bring them with you too. My Canon bodies can also be charged by USB, so that's my backup in case one of the chargers stops working when I'm on the road. All right, now let's talk about managing all of those images. Backup, backup, backup. Backup is everything. You want to have multiple copies in multiple locations to make sure you don't lose anything, even if disaster strikes. I try to copy new images to the computer as often as possible, since until that point, the photos are only on the card in the camera. That makes me really nervous. I try not to leave the scene of a shoot until I've run a backup. At a concert, for example, I usually have time after the show to copy images backstage before I head back to the hotel. So even if I don't do any editing, I'll at least know that I have the images in 2 places. And when I do finally start to edit, I work on my internal hard drive only. I copy all of the images there and I use Photo Mechanic to cull through them and then bring my final selects into Capture One for toning. I did a pretty thorough video about my Photo Mechanic workflow a few years ago. I'm going to put a link to that down below so you can watch that whenever you want, after you watch this, of course. Now, I like to work on the internal drive because it's fast. Even if I was using fast external drives, I'd also be worried about knocking the cord out while I was editing, and that could cause some data loss. Not having anything attached means I can easily work on a plane or a train or a car with the computer in my lap if I have to. It's just much easier that way. And remember, I still have the images on my digital cards if anything were to go wrong. Now, because I'm using the same computer on the road and at home, I can stick with my main Capture One library and just work as if I was working at home. If you use Lightroom or whatever, it's the same program you'll open at home, so it just makes things super easy. Now, if I was using a different computer on the road, what I'd probably do is create a temporary Capture One library just for this trip. And then when I get back to my other machine, I'll copy that library into my primary one. I have a master Luke Combs library at home with every show of his that I've photographed. So after the few shows I do on the road, I just copy them over to the other computer and then import that library to combine it with my master. It's pretty simple to do in Capture One. I'm guessing it's the same for Lightroom. Okay, so whether you're using one machine or 2, you're still going to need to have backups on the road. As I've already said, your first line of defense is the original images on your digital cards, but that's really only for emergencies because you've probably spent some time culling and editing, and it would not be fun to have to start that process all over again if you lost some of that data. So if you watch that photo mechanic video, you'll see that I keep everything from each unique photo shoot contained in one folder. So that keeps it very clean and easy to back up. After I'm done editing, or even at multiple points along the way, I'll copy that entire folder to 2 separate external hard drives. And just like with the digital cards, figure out how much space you think you'll need, and then buy 4 or 5 times that amount to be safe. You can never have too much storage. Nobody in history has ever said, oh my God, I've got too much storage. It has never happened. Whatever you get though, buy 2 of them. I use the small OWC external SSD hard drives, not hard drives, SSD drives, like the Envoy Pro. I like SSD because they just handle travel better when they're getting bounced around in my bag over a spinning hard drive. Now for me, 1 terabyte is easily big enough for a weekend of concerts. Those OWC drives are bus powered, so they get power through the USB connection to your computer and don't have to be plugged into a wall outlet. Even so, I'm not going to keep them connected for very long. I'm simply copying that 1 folder of organized images from the shoot onto each hard drive. The 2 drives are identical. I'm going to copy them to both. One of them is going to stay in the same bag with my computer. It's just a backup in case the computer dies. And the other goes into any other bag that I'm traveling with, ideally not into the checked bag that's going under the airplane. That one's a backup in case my computer bag is entirely lost or stolen. Since that first drive is in there with the computer, then they both would be gone if anything happened to the bag. Now on longer tours, when I'm not going to be coming back home after every weekend, I've gone so far as to give one of the backup drives to a friend on another tour bus. That way, if anything happened to my bus, I'd still have the images. Now this may seem like a lot, but the extra effort is worth the peace of mind, especially for you, David, on your once-in-a-lifetime trip. Oh, hey, you never told us where you're going on this trip. Hopefully you're watching this video. Let us know down in the comments below so we can all be jealous of wherever you're headed. Now, I also travel with a 3rd external drive. This one is the same size as the internal drive in my computer. Every few weeks or so, I'm just going to run a complete backup of my computer drive using a program called Carbon Copy Cloner. Now, I used to make a bootable copy, which meant that I could use that drive as my startup disk if anything happened to my internal drive. Apple, unfortunately, has made that a bit more challenging to do with the latest operating systems, so I just do a full backup of all the data. I have not had to use that yet, knock on wood, but again, it's just to make sure I don't lose my important computer data on the road. I also have another backup at home, including a time machine version that runs when I'm there. Okay, so lastly, it's nice to have all those hard drives of data, but once I've finished with my editing, I take all of my final best images and I upload them to the cloud. I've been a PhotoShelter customer for over 15 years now. Their system powers my website, it stores my archive, and it allows me to license photos and charge clients directly. I also use it to deliver images from every show to Luke and his management team, along with individual password-protected galleries for each band member. It's a pretty great system, but you can use whatever cloud system you want as long as it's secure. I like to upload both my final toned JPEGs along with the corresponding RAW files. If I ever need them, I know they're safely stored in the cloud. Now, after all that, when I get home, I can just copy my backed up folders into my regular archive system. I put 1 set onto a physical drive, 1 set goes into the cloud with PhotoShelter, which hopefully was already done while I was on the road, and 1 set on a giant Synology NAS in my studio. If you don't know what a NAS is, it stands for Network Attached Storage. It's basically a collection of hard drives working together to hold over 100 terabytes of my archive. It's on my network, so I can access it from anywhere in the world. I have received questions for the show about NAS systems. I'm planning to upgrade mine sometime in the near future, so I'll do a video after that process is complete. So David, I hope that answers your question. I figured I'd go a bit deeper to help anyone else watching this who might be traveling and wants to make sure their images all get home safely. Did I miss anything? What other tips and tricks do you all have for protecting your images while on the road? Let me know down in the comments below. Remember, you can send in your own photo questions by going to askdavidbergman.com. If you like these videos, I do appreciate you hitting that like button and of course subscribing to the Adorama YouTube channel. Click that bell icon so you're notified when new shows come out for myself and all the hosts on Adorama TV. Thanks so much for joining me, and I hope you'll come back right here next time on Ask David Bergman.